Hello, this is African Esquire, and this is the Federation of African Liberation. We are a Pan-Africanist organization that seeks to unite Africans throughout the diaspora to fight colonialism, fight neocolonialism, and fight imperialism and any other ism that has been created to destroy African progress. And today I'm going to talk about a story that has just come out of West Africa, and this is something that's going on in Gabon right now. So if you haven't heard, there was a coup or an attempted coup inside of Gabon. I'm going to play a video right now so that you can see basically what actually happened.
First of all, let's get you some breaking news coming out of Gabon, where soldiers have taken over the national radio station. They've criticised President Ali Bongo Ondimba, who's been out of the country for medical treatment since October. Ali Bongo recently addressed the country in a New Year's message from a hospital bed in Morocco.
Le message à la nation du chef de l'État.
The message to the head of state, Ali Bongo Ondimba, is that the debate on his health has reinforced doubts about the president's ability to handle the heavy burden of the responsibilities of his office.
La patrie nous a tout donné.
The homeland has given us everything and made us the people we are. We cannot abandon it. So the patriotic movement of youth of the defense and security forces, in order to preserve the integrity of the country, has decided to take responsibility to stop the ongoing moves to seize power by those who, on the night of the disputed election in 2016, killed our young compatriots with the support of illegal and illegitimate institutions.
So let's recap the crucial facts of this story. So again, the coup happened on January 7th, 2019. Now, according to CNN, 2 soldiers who were suspected of being a part of the attempted coup in Gabon were killed and 8 military officers were arrested. That is what the state media reported on Tuesday. The suspected coup plotters stormed the state radio station and television headquarters around 4 a.m. Monday, allegedly taking journalists and staff hostage while they read out a statement saying that they had taken control of the Central African nation. The officers declared their dissatisfaction with President Ali Bongo and said that they had seized power to restore democracy in the country. And I think that's really an important place to pause at. They say they were trying to restore democracy in the country, and although the media in Gabon has basically tried to paint these as just some people who are trying to stir up and cause trouble, is basically what they have said, we should know that if that was their aim and that was what they were there for, that was actually something that's legitimate, because Gabon, like many African, especially former Francophone African countries, is a dictatorship. And I wanted to highlight that because if you listen to what the international community is saying, I'm going to read a statement from the African Union. The African Union strongly condemns the coup attempt this morning in Gabon. I reaffirm the AU's total rejection of all unconstitutional changes of power. And that is Musa Faki Mahamat, and that he is from the African Union. Now, not only him, Stephanie Dujarric, a spokesman for the UN Secretary General, called on all actors to adhere to constitutional means in resolving the incident. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari said in a statement on Tuesday that the era of military coups and governments were long gone. And he also told the people to embrace constitutional provisions in democracy. Similarly, someone who was also very much against the coup was the French government, who released a statement saying that they reject the coup and say that they only support constitutional changes of power. And the reason why that is so hypocritical is because if you know what has been going on inside of Gabon prior to this, for ages, going on right now still, even in spite of the fact that this coup has been put down, you know that it is completely the opposite of a democratic society. It's completely the opposite of a society that is ruled and controlled by the people. And that really makes me question when you hear these leaders, and the UN also condemned the coup. So you had the African Union, you had the UN, you had the French government, who basically has a lot of pull over in Gabon. You have so many people who have condemned the coup, and they're saying, well, we only support democratic change, constitutional change. In spite of that, they completely ignored the acts that have been done by the Bongo administration that have completely disregarded the Constitution of Gabon. That makes you really question, what is constitutional to you? Because it's only constitutional whenever you have people actually fighting back and saying, we don't want to stand for this. It's not about what's constitutional when you have the president doing things that are unconstitutional. So I'm going to go through some of the things that make this whole idea that the coup should have been condemned by the international community really show that it's nothing but being motivated by colonial and neo-colonial powers who are afraid and who are scared that they're going to lose their hold in any part of Africa, let alone somewhere like Gabon, which is very oil rich. So according to an article in Express UK, Mr. Bongo, who is 59 years old, suffered a stroke in Saudi Arabia in October of 2018. He has been outside of the country for several months receiving secretive medical treatment in Morocco. Let's just pause right there and really talk about what's going on. So if you can imagine wherever you are in the world, let's say the President of the United States were to get sick. Most people know that the president would basically have to resign or else get impeached. However, for some reason, it's okay for in Gabon that the president who is so sick that he's been out of his country, right now it's January, so from October 2018 until January 2019, and does not show any progress of actually coming back into the country anytime soon, it's okay that he has been so sick that he's not been able to carry out his job. Because let's remember, the president actually does have an important job. The president is supposed to be the executive. The president is supposed to listen to the people. You actually have to be in your country to hear what your people are telling you. You have to actually know what's going on in your country. The president is supposed to take executive action. The president is supposed to be a foreign policy liaison. The president has a lot of duties, has a lot of responsibilities. So the idea that this would be acceptable anywhere else in the world outside of Africa, I don't think it would be. I don't think that you would find many people who would feel okay living inside of the country where their president is not present. If anything, the idea of democracy that the AU has talked about, that the UN has talked about, that France and all these other people are talking about, this pretend democracy. How do you have a democracy where you're not being represented by the person who's actually elected to represent you in the most powerful position in that country? And the answer is that's not a democracy. So let's use our words very carefully when we're talking about democracy and constitutional change. And we'll get to the constitutional part in a moment. So to continue reading, on December 31st, 2018, in one of his first television appearances since the stroke, the president slurred his words and appeared to have difficulty moving his right arm. It is unclear whether he will be able to walk. In his address, Mr. Bongo said the country was indivisible. It acknowledged his poor health, but without giving specific details. And think about this again. If the president, who's an elected official, again, let's keep in mind, this is not hypothetically supposed to be a monarchy. It's not supposed to be a dictatorship, although we know it is. Hypothetically, according to what the West says, this is supposed to be a democracy. And if you're an elected official, you are elected to represent the people. Yet you want to hide your health conditions from the people who you're supposed to be representing. Again, you don't represent yourself. You represent them. And they don't have a right to know what your health condition is, when you'll be back into power, when you'll actually be able to serve their interests. So understand, when you hear these people criticizing the coup, the attempted coup, they're not really criticizing something as far as democracy, as far as constitutional changes. The real fear is the change in the neo-colonial relationship. And when I say the neo-colonial relationship, the major neo-colonial relationship as far as Gabon is with a very frequent perpetrator who I talk about all the time on this channel, and that's the French government, because France, again, is the most severely obvious colonial power today. They are unashamed about the fact that they have this colonial relationship with African countries. They have the CFA franc, where they require 14 African countries to pay out of their national reserve into their national reserve. So these are things that have been clear for throughout history, and yet the French government has not backed up. They've never called out themselves out, although they still act like they're for human rights. They're really not for human rights and for the sovereignty of African countries, because they impose policies on these countries which cause for those countries to be subservient to France. So let's talk more about this hypocrisy. So again, with Gabon, you have to remember that it's a major oil producer. And although it's a major oil producer, the people don't get the benefit of that, because a third of the country is actually in poverty, according to a World Bank. Now, the history of the presidency in Gabon is originally the President Ali Bongo. His father was installed shortly after the country got independence in 1967. He was installed as the president. Now, Mr. Bongo held power from 1967 until his death in 2009. So 1967, that's back when, you know, a king was walking around, up into his death. In 2009, this single person held power. Let's go back to democracy. Why weren't y'all concerned with the democracy at that point? Why weren't y'all concerned with constitutional provisions at that point? And the reason is, of course, always read between the lines. It's not about constitutions. It's not about democracy. It's about colonialism and maintaining that dominance, Western dominance inside of that country. So, but they've said again that this is about democracy. So, and in 2009, his son Ali Bongo took power. Now, here's something interesting outside of this obvious, you know, odd relationship where it's okay for for a family to hold power inside of a country for over 50 years. In 2018, the president tried to get more power inside of the country, despite the fact that his family has already held power for over 50 years. So I'm reading from an article from News 24. It says, recent constitutional changes have marked a consolidation of what the opposition has called a power grab. The change removes presidential terms, effectively allowing President Ali Bongo to rule for life. He has been empowered to make policy decisions without the input of political stakeholders. Now, again, where was the people talking about them? Where was the AU talking about democracy when the president was trying to have that unchecked power? Because my understanding of democracy, at least from what I've been taught, is that you don't have one single person who has the ability to carry out laws and whatnot, but you have to have other people who have a say, not just one person. Otherwise, it's just a dictatorship. But, you know, I digress. The highly controversial constitutional amendments had minimum public input and were designed to consolidate the power of the executive. Just, again, minimum public input. If the public doesn't have input, you don't have a democracy. The Constitution is void. If the public aren't engaged inside of what's going on, if they're not sought to be engaged, if this is completely done in the dark, then that is not a democracy. It's a sham of a democracy. Now, this will allow the president to rule without consultation, a kind of untamed presidency. The opposition has pointed to the changes that undermine democracy and good governments. This is especially the case because some of these changes require Gabon's defense and security heads to take an oath of allegiance to the president. So, if you can imagine, not to the country. And I have to, use other examples because, some of us, we live in different places and we're used to certain things. We're used to seeing soldiers being obligated to take an oath to the country, right? To the American country, to France, to Germany, to China, wherever you are. You're not used to seeing them have to take an oath to a leader. The only time that you do see them have to take an oath to the leader is when it's not a democracy, when it's actually a dictatorship. So again, understand there's been a long history in this country where this country has not been a democracy. So to pretend that a coup where the people are trying to restore democracy, that's what they said. We want to restore democracy. We're sick of this person who's sick, having the ability to say that he's the president of our country when he's actually not doing anything for us, and said he's too sick to even be a president in our own country. He has to get health care from other people. The fact that they want that to be considered a democracy and not something that will actually actually be representative of the people of democracy shows that they're not interested in democracy. So I have to keep hammering that point because you have to learn to read between the lines, like I said. So the other thing I want to talk about is the Gabon court actually amended the Constitution to allow for President Bongo to be away from the country and allow for him to basically be away and still hold the office of the presidency. Now, I'm reading from an article. Let me see. What is this article? 1 second. I want to find out where the article's from so that you can look it up for yourself. Okay, here we go. Business Live. Businesslive.com. All right, so the title of the article, Gabon Court Amends Constitution to Accommodate Bongo's Absence. This article was written on November 15, 2018. Gabon's top court has intervened in a crisis surrounding hospitalized President Ali Bongo, allowing him to declare a storm of circumstances that has been modified the Constitution to address his temporary incapacity. Speculation about Bongo's future has grown since the 59-year-old president has taken to the hospital in Saudi Arabia. And after initially saying Bongo had been admitted there for severe fatigue, his office on Sunday admitted that he had undergone surgery. So that's not transparent if you're saying that he's just fatigued and he's actually getting surgery. Now, it says his condition has greatly improved and he was recovering most of his functions, but gave no details about his illness or when he would return. The president of the Constitutional Court, Mary Madeline Mborantusuo, stated on Wednesday that the court had decided to modify the Constitution in order to address the scenario of temporary incapacity by the head of state. So, I'm actually going to keep reading 1 second. And it inserted text in the charter that said, in the event of temporary unavailability of the president, certain functions may be carried out by the vice president or the prime minister accordingly. Opposition figures and civil society groups reacted furiously to the court's move, accusing the Mborantusuo, a close ally of Bongo and of his father, Omar Bongo, who governed the country for nearly 42 years until his death in 2009, of illegality. The court in no respects has the right to modify the Constitution, said Paul Marie Gonjut of the National Union, one of the main opposition parties. This lady cannot be allowed to trample on our Constitution and give away the sovereignty of the Gabonese people. And yes, so just once again to drive this point home before we call it a day. So the president left the country. Not only that, but one of his friends in the court steps in and says, oh, he's gone from the country, so let's put it in the Constitution. And the Constitution is not supposed to be something that you just change whenever, you know, it needs to be convenient to change. It's supposed to be something that is actually written almost in stone. And the only time you change it is when there is like mass support because of a constitutional referendum to actually say that we're going to change the Constitution. But for some reason, inside of countries in Africa, it's okay to change the Constitution so quickly whenever an inconvenience is met to the administration. So this court official says, okay, well, my friend, he's not able to be the president right now. Therefore, I'm going to change the Constitution by myself without telling the people, without asking the people. I'm going to change the Constitution and I'm going to allow for him to be sick and out of the country while he is still the president. And I want to just drive this point home. This is not a democracy. The idea that these countries could still be called democracies while they're clearly dictatorships, you don't have unilateral action done like this inside of any type of country that says they're a democracy. Now, we have to start criticizing these words, you know, democracy, constitution, because we have to understand oftentimes they're used inside of the international context to cripple countries that are actually countries that they want to keep subjugated. So they'll say, we're going to Iraq. We're not going to Iraq to exploit oil. We're going to Iraq to actually put into place democracy. We're going into Libya because of democracy. We're going into these places because of democracy. And often with these African countries that are supported by outside governments. What is said is that we're going to support these countries because they're a democracy. But when is it a democracy and when is it not? Because if you're saying that it's not a democracy in Gabon, where the father, the senior president, former president, held power for 47 years, his son now has held power and is trying to hold power for life. And then not just that, but you can have unilateral action done by a court official to change the constitution, not change a law. The actual constitution is supposed to be almost written in stone. Change that to help the president, help her friend. That is not democracy. So clearly, the agenda has to change as far as what we're looking for, what we're asking for, and what we actually think is necessary to change the circumstances. And I think what the attempted coup showed is that people are tired of protesting. They're tired of peaceful protests. They're tired of walking the streets and just getting beat down by the police, but they're actually willing to take drastic action to get an actual democracy. So, of course, the government's going to continue to try to paint these people as people who are not of the people whose discontent is actually not representative of the population. But keep in mind that their discontent is very representative of the population. In fact, in 2016, President Bongo actually, a lot of people believe he probably lost the election. However, again, if you were concerned about democracy, why would you be concerned about a contested election? His election was very contested, yet he's still in power. Like many countries, like many leaders, it doesn't matter if you actually lose the election, if you have outside funding from, say, the French government, if you have support by international actors, you can actually still say that you're president, even when you're not. So this is what has been happening in Gabon. And I just want us to spread the awareness and actually support the people and actually addressing these issues. Why is it okay for this to happen in African countries? We will never accept this happening anywhere else. So therefore, African people throughout the diaspora, let's not accept this happening in Gabon or any African country. So that's all I have for you all today, and I will see you all in another video.